What more have you learnt about the Operation Midnight Hammer?
Well, Catherine, what we've learned from the Pentagon is that this was an exercise or an operation that was months in the planning, and that in fact it involved a lot of artifice and deception. Now, people would say that happens in times of war or military operation, but we got the detail of decoys being set up, how the United States ensured that there were some of these stealth bombers, these B-2 bombers, which are the only aircraft that can carry these bunker buster bombs, that they had departed to the west across the Pacific. That was apparently, and all the airline traffickers and whatever were able to track them, and so the media was doing stories about them, and it appears they were doing that so the Iranians could have a sense that we know where they are and we know when they'll attack, if they do attack, at the same time as the real stealth bombers, the ones that we're going to engage in this attack. 7 of them flew quietly off to the east, if you like, under the media radar, and so that level of decoy is quite extraordinary. And we learned that there were 14 of these bunker buster bombs dropped. In fact, there were 12 on the Fordow, which is the facility under the mountain, and 2 on Natanz. And then Isfahan, the third of the major nuclear facilities in Iran, was hit by a lot of missiles fired by submarines, US submarines.
We heard from President Trump yesterday speaking of obliteration to these sites. What more have we learnt about how these attacks have impacted on Iran's nuclear sites and whether that is enough to indeed stop its nuclear programs?
I don't think anybody really knows yet. I don't think the Iranians know either the extent of the damage, because for Fordow you can see the satellite photos of the top of the mountain has clearly been hit or burnt by explosives or bombs being dropped, but it's difficult to know what's happened underneath, whether any of the corridors, any of the facilities have collapsed in on themselves. I would have thought with 12 of these 30,000-pound bombs dropped on it that there would have been an impact underground. We don't know that. Even the International Atomic Energy Agency says they don't know yet the real impact of these bombs, but it's certain that these 3 facilities were seriously damaged. It's not quite sure whether the claim President Trump makes that they have been basically obliterated. It's not clear whether that claim stacks up at the moment.
We heard from Pete Hegseth from that Pentagon meeting saying, or suggesting it wasn't about regime change, but in the last hour or so, the US president has taken to his social media site, claiming perhaps something alternate to that.
Well, that's right. Extraordinary times we live in, Catherine, when the President of the United States actually, in a mocking way and laughing almost at it, talks about regime change, where he says it is not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again in capital letters, why wouldn't there be regime change? MIGA. So instead of MAGA, Make America Great Again, he's laughing at this, that there should be a movement formed, Make Iran Great Again. Now, the Israelis also deny that that's the motivation for these attacks, but the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that, in fact, regime change might be the result of some of these attacks. Now, that poses a lot of follow-up questions too. Iran's a nation of about 90 million people, and what would regime change look like? Would it result in complete chaos? It's one thing for the United States and Israel to want to get rid of the current regime, but what is it replaced with? Does it become 90 million people in the heart of the Middle East involved in civil unrest? Does it become like the former Yugoslavia that descended into Croatia and Slovakia and Serbia and just became, Serbia and Croatia, and became a complete civil war there with all of the human rights atrocities? So what does regime change want, and is that really what the Americans and the Israelis want?
And finally, John, what is the justification and the evidence that is being used to justify the US involvement here?
no evidence at this stage that we've seen, apart from President Trump's word. He has said that his own national security advice here in the United States has got it wrong. He says Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the national intelligence agencies, that she has got it wrong when she gave evidence recently that Iran was not developing a nuclear weapon and that the supreme leader of Iran did not want one. So really, there is no evidence that anybody has seen, which why I find it very interesting a country like Australia comes out and backs the America's bombing of Iran based on no evidence.